So we are reading lesson 2 from Making It Big. My alarm goes off at 5 a.m. I've slept barely 2.5 hours. No matter how tired I am, I have to get up, shower, dress quickly, and jump into my car. It doesn't matter that I went to bed 2 a.m. That was yesterday. Today is a new day. There are new things to do and new challenges to tackle. Because my house is in Ikeja and the office is on the Victoria Island, 30 kilometers southeast of home. I always set foot before 5:30. The journey encompasses 2 bridges, and if I left it any later, I would get stuck in the early traffic on the 3rd Milan Bridge. It still takes me at least an hour or on average, but that's better than 2 or 3 hours I did be facing if I ignored alarm. My typical morning didn't involve an alarm going off, or much less before I started Xenon Petroleum Gas Limited. Then Petroleum and Gas Limited, those were the days when my daughter had embarrassingly described my occupation as sleeping. I ran center for dispensing short-term loans, but it needed little attention from me. I could even decide not to be in the office for a few days at a time. As long as my staff tick all the relevant boxes in process loan application, they could bring the documents to me at home to approve, or I could provide provisional approval on the phone before getting to the office at 11 a.m. Sometimes I wouldn't show up until midday. I treated Center Force as something to do with my time. It was a way to make a living. I started getting juicy car supply contracts and was making money, but the desire to push the company higher, to really excel, was not there. I did not set a good example for the staff. It was a case of do as I say rather than do as I do. Center Force was always going to die a natural death, but I had to change my ways with Xenon. With this exciting new enterprise, I needed to end up my game. Consider a footballer in a Nigerian club with no desire to play abroad. Now compare him with one who wants to play for the biggest clubs in the Europe and does everything possible to get there. His commitment, passion, and discipline will be dramatically different. The former was me at Center Force, the latter yours truly at Xenon. It's no exaggeration to say that I was a new me at Xenon. I wanted to supply diesel to the end users where and when they needed it, dead cheap, and with the unerring efficiency. I identified a big hole in the supply chain that I could fill, and I did so. I envisioned endless possibilities, as if I were sitting in the pilot with the pilot in the cockpit of a jet, surveying the expansive landscape below. I felt newly energized. Xenon needed to be on sound footing, doing business differently. I had to be in front, truly leading, steering things in the right direction. I was not going to become the king of diesel by spending most of my time at the nightclubs and sleeping until lunchtime. My intentions were clear from the beginning. Samson, the driver, was the pilot of the plane, the second-hand van I bought to distribute drums of diesel. I always sat beside him in our cockpit as we made our rounds, reaching out to clients and delivering the products. From my vantage point, I could see the proverbial landscape of promise and potential rolling out in all directions. I saw a country gripped by an erratic power supply, and I saw homes darken. I saw factories, engines silence. Above all, I saw a golden opportunity, the chance to solve a problem, meet people's needs, and make good money doing it. They say the problems and opportunities are the same thing, and I came to see the wisdom in that. I would have been stupid to stay asleep. I was now a textbook, no nonsense boss. I arrived at the office at 6:30 morning. Although the starting time was 8 p.m., employees had to be punctual. I would not tolerate trueness of lateness. I stayed later than anyone else, generally until 7 p.m., but often as late as 9. As I mentioned earlier, I did head to the ports and terminals west of Lagos Island to the oversee operations at the Apapa Depot. That daily visit was primarily to supervise the loading of the products by my trucks. I did be there until 2 a.m., sometimes 3 a.m. before heading home. Number 1, there's a lot of hard work and sacrifice behind any worthwhile achievement. Not many know this behind the scenes origin story of Xenon and how we came to dominate the market. Some seem to think we came out of nowhere and were handed a monopoly on a silver platter. In fact, there's a story behind every success. Dr. Sam Adeyemi, the pastor and leadership consultant, once said, "Don't envy my harvest. You were not there when I was planting seed. It took blood, sweat, tears for me to build Xenon from the ground up. But many only got to know me about us after we did make it big. They thought we just started up to the podium to receive the trophy. If Nigeria had been working well, I would have no business controlling the diesel market. There was no reason for diesel to be scarce in an oil-producing country, but scarce it was. I simply saw a gap and capitalized on the inefficiency in the system. If the power sector had worked as it should have, diesel would only be for trucks and ships. It wouldn't have been necessary for homes, offices, and factories. The demand was used due to some millions of people needing this resource to survive, because there was no reliable electricity. Still, dominating the market required hard work, maneuvering, and investment. 2, give your business the attention, time, and energy it requires. Your goal should be to take it to the next level. My midnight adventures were no overkill. They were a necessity. See me work until late at night every night. MT Onuku, the NNPC operations manager, became quite supportive of me. At times, he would even call in the real hours to inform me that it was time to pick up the product. I was always by my phone, waiting for the golden call. Get ready to receive, he would say, or the weather is calm. Pull your ship alongside. He would be there to help me when it was time to load. As a result, I could not afford to sleep. I had to be in a constant communication with my ship's captain to pass this information on to him. Before the relocation, NNPC was the alpha and the omega of diesel. There was no other source. It was agency inefficiency that made scarcity inevitable. For instance, if total demand was 200,000 metric tons per month, NNPC would import only 80,000, less than 50% of what was needed, because the country's four NNPC owned and operated refineries were out of commission. They were not producing petrol, much less diesel. Nigerians were in perpetual short supply. To beat your competitors at the monopoly's Atlas Cove jetties, you needed to be awake, alert, and ready to move. At any given time, there were 40 ships lined up and waiting to load. By midnight, even when everybody else would be sound asleep, I would stand by awaiting a call from Onukugu so our ship could position itself at the front of the queue. I could have designated an employee to oversee those midnight operations, but I couldn't guarantee that they too would not be sleeping. This delivered numerous benefits in addition to being first in line. Number 3, more luck comes the way of the prepared. Late one night, when I was overseeing a fuel transfer at the depot, I saw another vessel out at the sea maneuvering to come in. It was the Ocean Challenger, owned by Wale Tinubu, CEO of Owando PLC. The ship was going to supply diesel to someone, but I had other ideas for it. Around 1 a.m., I called Owando's operations guy and asked him to sell the load to me. He told me that wouldn't be possible, as it was earmarked for one of their customers. I would not take no for an answer. I immediately called Wale and threw him a juicy proposal. That cargo, how much do you plan to sell it for me? I will pay an extra 6 naira per liter, I told him. Without hesitation, he asked them to discharge it into my tank like Don Coloni's famous line from The Godfather. I did made him an offer he could not refuse. Number 4, conquer your fears and always look for better options. One major problem I encountered with NNPC was location. I was living in Lagos while Ode Oka Isabo, the man in charge of this allocation, was in the nation's capital, Abuja, where the National Oil Company was headquartered. After I started getting a direct supply from NNPC, I needed to develop a smooth working relationship with him. There were always meetings and events in Abuja that he wanted me to attend, but I was afraid to take local flights, which weren't exactly known for their safety. Interestingly, I hadn't been frightened of such things before. It only took hold when I started making money. At this point, I was worth about $100 million, and out of the inflated sense of self-importance, I suppose I developed an acute fear of dying. Yet, I knew it wouldn't be advantageous to be closer to the decision maker in Abuja. Oka Isabo used to call me Alaye, Yoruba slang for chairman or a strong man. So I knew I was on his radar and he took me seriously. Come on, Alaye, he did say. What's a 45 minutes flight? Come on. One day when he was in Lagos, he called me and said, we are going to Abuja on Changi Airlines, first flight out in the morning. It was not a suggestion. I took it as a command. I could not sleep that night. I drank until 6 a.m., showered, and got to the airport in the hope that I had drown my fear of flying. As we walked towards the plane, I could feel my legs shaking. The liquid courage was failing me. I could not climb the gangway. I slumped to the side, a total wreck. It was very embarrassing. Oka Isabo bad. Let's go. I just could not muster that the will to climb. He boarded in anger and the plane left. I told my guys, let's go to Abuja by road. We left around 9 a.m. When we got to Ibadan, a city located about a quarter of the way into our drive, I called Oka Isabo on the mobile phone, but he didn't answer. We reached in Abuja in the evening, went straight to see him. To my great gift, the incident on the road was seemingly forgotten, and we got back down to business. Ironically and quite sadly, Oka Isabo died several years later abroad, a Bellevue Airlines flight that crashed in October 2005. Anytime he requested a meeting after the Chang Picasso, I would go to Abuja by road, setting out at 8 a.m. and arriving at 4 p.m. I did say at the Transcom Hilton in Maitama, a leafy upscale district of capital dotted with embassies. I soon realized this wouldn't work. Government officials would not come to business meetings in a hotel, and so I decided to buy a property from Alhaji Aliyu Abubakar, the man behind AA Oil. The house is on Aso Drive, cost me $2 million, which the company paid for. This proved to be advantageous, as I could stay in Abuja for longer periods, receive distinguished visitors in style, and dedicated more time and attention to lucrative business deals. I used to stay for a month at a stretch. Being in Abuja gave me a strategic advantage over my key competitors, Obat and Ascon, as they were not in the capital that frequently. They would fly in, leave the following day, and not return for another month like me. They were rightfully scared of domestic air travel in our country. Zenon was now growing in stature and making $5 to $6 million US dollars every month. At this time, the exchange rate was 112 per $1. That came to more than 600 million a month for a company that was making just 100 million a few years earlier. That was something. The limitations of leading from the front. As heady as Tinsim, leading from the front has its limits. I started getting many things wrong, and spectacularly so. This would later combine to bring Zenon from his multi-billion-dollar height to complete ruin. In retrospect, I made 3 significant mistakes with the business. Here is what I learned from this misstep. 1. Formal company structure is critical. Zenon was a top-heavy enterprise without much structure or delegation. You might have noticed that I have interchangeably referred to I and Zenon in this narrative. I rarely say we. I was Zenon, and Zenon was me. I practically ran it like a one-person business, and this held us back. 2. Relying too heavily on one person is not ideal, even if that person is you. While I adhere to complying with the minimum of board meetings required, I know I could have done things better. I should have had more structure and invested in bringing in the right experts and talent to give the organization direction. 3. When hierarchy isn't respected, tensions can build up. I would give people assignments without informing their direct superiors. Managers would hear about the new rules and activities from their subordinates. I would issue directives that were driven more by youthful hunger for success than any management science. I didn't have the patience for meetings and wasn't prepared to listen to other people's ideas. I welled up undisputed authority, and that was the final word. This worked for me a while, but there's a limit to how far you can get doing things this way. When you are starting out and still trying to find out your feet, you can be everywhere, holding the reins, burning the midnight oil, calling the ship captain to move into position at the jetty, even setting down and to interview and recruit the office cleaners. But at some point, you need to step back. You have to put an appropriate administrative structure in place, give a degree of power to your managers, and interfere less in the day-to-day operations of what you have created. I didn't appreciate the principles until the Zenon Empire came crashing down. The fall of the king of diesel was dramatic. I hit the lowest point of my life. I had operated my business based on ambition, raw talent, and instinct. I looked up to nobody, and I had no mentors or advisors. In the end of the year, your natural talent and intuition can only take you some distance, especially when you find yourself running a huge enterprise. I did never study anybody's model to try to understand what they did right and what they did wrong. I didn't bother to find out how other Nigerian business leaders had built their empire. At times, I look back and I wondered if things might have turned out differently for Zenon if I did just taking time to study the success of others and learn from their experiences. There's no question that I would have been better off if I had done the research, studied the principle of delegation and management, and grown the business in more conventional manner. For one, Zenon would have been better structured and probably wouldn't have collapsed as it did. I was the chairman, CEO, CFO, company secretary, operations manager, admin manager, and everything in between. Literally, everything revolved around me. My yes was the law and my no was the degree. I sacked people without disciplinary process. I did shout, "You are fired!" at the drop of a hat, with no discussion, recourse, or appeal. A new leadership approach as we rebranded. My style had to change when I bought the majority stake in African Petroleum in 2007. AP, a retail and a wholesale entity, was the downstream arm of British Petroleum before reorganizing into a separate firm in 1977 in response to the Nigerianization degree for foreign companies operating in our country. It was a different model altogether. As chairman and the CEO, I realized I was now playing in a different league, organized and buttoned down in every sense. This footballer was no longer playing in the local league. For starters, there was a definite management team and a board of directors. There would be no more calling up ship captains and intervening cleaning crews. AP was listed as a publicly traded stock. The strictness, reporting and transparency requirements of the Nigerian Stock Exchange would not allow it to be run as a one-man operation. AP was a traditional institution with well-defined process, a situation that even I, as an investor and ostensible Bill, the owner, could learn from. I wasn't starting from scratch and making it up along the way, as I had done with Femco, Centerforce, and Xenon. We are talking about a big business that will be raising billions from public offerings, which was all about regularity, oversight, and public trust. Still, I can recall reluctance on my part to let go. It was when we rebranded AP as a 40 Oil in 2010 that I can confidently say I had probably structured a business for the first time in my entrepreneurial career. I took the position of non-executive chairman and appointed an experienced CEO. We developed a strategic vision, created appropriate institutional processes, and I removed myself from day-to-day operations. If I did die in the first 40 oil days, the business would have continued to run without any hiccups. There were succession plans in place that we were always the first to submit financial reports to the stock exchange spoke volumes. Given all that, it began to dawn on me that I have always been more than an entrepreneur than a manager. I had a lot to learn and certainly had to fine-tune my style. Following the Xenon experience, leading from the front doesn't mean you have to recruit the receptionist. Leadership does not always entail reporting to the office at 6 a.m. That would be good for a small business just starting out, but 40 Oil was bigger than me. I needed to adopt a fundamental different mentality and assume my entirety different role. The entrepreneur can be executive chairman if he so chooses. However, he needs a competent and robust CEO as his deputy, somehow who will oversee the day-to-day management of his company. Before the 40 Oil experience, I found it difficult to recruit a good CEO that I could trust to do the job. As a result, there was a high turnover until I found the right person. It took me nearly a decade to find the ideal CEO for Xenon. Find an excellent CEO, take a back seat. In Akin Fiwa, I finally found the perfect fit, which made my transition from entrepreneur to leader much easier. He was someone I could sit and have a discussion with. He would give me blunt advice, even when he knew I might not be predisposed to it. He was not a psychopath. Nothing he said was meant to simply please me or massage my ego. I finally had someone I could trust to put me in check and run the business honestly, professionally, and competently. I took the back seats without any fears. Akin previously worked as a business process analyst at FSB International Bank. From there, he moved to the oil and gas sector, where he earned his stripes as an international oil trader with Oando PLC. He was an executive assistant to Deputy MD Mofe Boyo before being moved to Oando Supply and Trading Limited, a sister company where he trained as a products and derivatives officer. He was the first true derivatives trader in Nigeria that gave him a platform to develop into a key personality in oil trading and supplies beyond the shores of Nigeria. It was from that position that I poached him. I needed an experienced hand, someone familiar with the biggest oil traders, to run Fine Shade Energy Limited, an energy trading company in London. Akin joined Fine Shade in November of 2006, moving to Xenon as CEO in late 2009, and came to 40 Oil in December 2011. He is now the CEO of Jerigu Power PLC, the gas-powered electricity generating company in the city of Ajaokuta, on whose board I sit, following my divestment from 40 Oil in 2019. My trust in him is complete and unwavering. The takeaways from lesson 2. I still lead, but I've learned to lead differently as an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur does not mean you will be removed entirely from the business once it matures. That would be like jumping from one extreme to the other. Young managers need supervision and direction. Despite any urge to have your company operate at your own whim, you need to draw the line and formalize some structure and discipline. The role of an entrepreneur is markedly different. They are the ones with the resources and sometimes the ideas, but they must engage managers to run the show. They don't have to deal with the nuts and the bolts on the bricks and mortar. I am not cut out to be a manager. I am an entrepreneur. Although I discovered this quite late, fortunately, it was not too late. That was a good read. Tomorrow we continue from lesson 3.